grew up in a family with 3 children. I had 2 brothers. Always wanted a sister. Only got 2 brothers. And I was in the middle. And we grew up in a neighborhood with quite a few children. And there was always something going on. And we lived in a house that covered 4 lots, and our father grew up on a farm, so we had lots of vegetables and fruits, trees, and a lot of activities going on, trees to climb, and we had a lot of free time to do what we wanted. Our house we grew up in was right on the edge of water. Norfolk had lots of inlets coming in various places, and our backyard, behind our backyard were a few woods, and right behind that was an inlet. Water came up, and across the street there was a few docks that we used to play on, crabbing and fishing. We didn't get much fish, but crabs we did, and had a little rowboat. Everybody laughs about that now because all we had was being able to row around a little bit in the area. But that was what we spent our summers doing, things like that, and playing in the big fields we had. Across the street was a big softball field that every night the neighbors would all get together and play softball. So it was a neighborhood that was very open, and we spent a lot of times with the neighborhood. Well, there were more boys in the neighborhood than there were girls. There were a few of us girls, so we did a lot of things with the boys, like climbing trees and throwing balls, and at one point I fell out of the tree, and I had been told by my parents not to climb the tree. I was in the 1st grade, and I fell. Since I wasn't supposed to be in the tree, I just said I fell on the sidewalk and broke my arm. But of course, it later came out what really happened. So I guess you could say that was the first lie it told in my life. Hopefully the last, but who knows? But we had a good time. The things we did. And like I said, it was more boy games than it was girls. I went to elementary school at Meadowbrook Elementary School, which was probably 5 or 6 blocks from us. And to get to it, we walked right past my grandparents' house. So real often we would stop in after school and get some kind of little snack from my grandmother, which was nice. And there would always be groups of people walking to the school. My favorite thing to do growing up was play the piano. I started at an early age. My mother had taught some, and she started me, and then when I was about 10, I started from another teacher in town, and had a friend that she and I played a lot of duets and 2 piano things, and we played several times in programs at the high school, sort of talent programs that they would do, and that was my most fun thing to do, was to play with somebody else rather than all by myself. and I studied piano all through high school and college. And in high school, I got up at 6 o'clock every morning to practice, so I would have my afternoons free to do what I wanted to do. And in high school, I was a member of several clubs that met after school, and so I could keep my afternoons free from practicing, and I enjoyed early morning. I'm an early morning person and do better than I do late at night. I never played an instrument to play in the band, but we had a marching group of girls that marched with the band to help make figures on the field at football games, and I enjoyed doing that, even though I didn't play an instrument. Since we were close to the coast, we spent a lot of time in the summer on beaches, and groups I was in, the youth group in our church, we would have several big parties at the beach during the summer. Then I was in a couple of clubs in high school, one with the YWCA, I guess it was, and we had trips to the beach. We were in the perfect place to enjoy the water and the beaches. That was our recreational things we did as much as anything. We grew up as it being a different day for us on Sunday, and the church was important. My dad was an elder in the church, and I think my grandparents had been too. So we grew up with that perspective in our lives. And we were able to do pretty much things we wanted to do. I guess the big thing in those days was when you went out, you went to a movie and got something to eat and came home, and we had deadlines. We had to be home a certain time, but they weren't real strict. I guess we never got caught with anything, so we were able to get away with as much as possible. But we had a pretty free life growing up. I think I was the kind of kid that tried to do exactly what I was told to do. I didn't buck the system or try to do anything I shouldn't. So, I look at myself that way. I'm not sure that was totally true, but we didn't have real strict things we had to do, I guess. Yeah, when the war started, I was 10 when Pearl Harbor was bombed. And so we were aware of a war going on, and Norfolk had the largest naval base in the world. And I think our elementary school was about 3 or 4 miles from the main entrance to the naval base. And the scariest thing that ever happened during the war to us, when I was in the 7th grade, there was a huge supply of bombs and material for bombing things at the base, and something happened and it blew up. And it broke windows in our school, and I remember we all had to get up. They had everybody get under the desks, and it was a really scary event. And then sirens went for hours down to the base and back, and a bunch of people were killed, mostly service people. And that was the closest that we ever came to feeling like we were in the war, I think. We also, at night, had black curtains had at the windows. If you wanted to keep lights on, you had to have black curtains to try to keep the area dark. So that was those were probably the biggest things that ever happened to us during the war. And compared to what was going on in Europe, it was nothing, but to us, it was the closest we ever felt to the war. But we survived and got through that period in the war. And my brother, when he graduated from high school, was drafted into the service. But in the meantime, he had applied for West Point, and they said he was the first alternate, so we didn't think he was going to get in. And so he was in the Army for about 9 months, and then he got word that the person that got the appointment didn't pass the final physical, and so he was appointed to West Point. So this was about a year after he finished high school. He went to West Point. And when he graduated from West Point, he had the option of going in the Air Force, which in those days was the Army Air Corps. And he did, and his plane was shot down in Korea. And he was reported missing for several years until the war ended. And then he was declared dead. And to me, that was a tragic, it was a tragic thing, to lose anybody in your family. And when he graduated from West Point, he had agreed to help me get through my college time, because I had finished 2 years of college, and he said he would help me through my last 2 years. And of course, about 3 months later, when he was shot down. So yeah, now that I'm a parent, I understand how hard that must have been with my parents, because they knew he'd been shot down, and the captain flying with him said they didn't think there was any way he could have gotten out. But then they got word that a prisoner had been released, and said that they had my brother's name and he was a prisoner. So for the rest of the war, they thought he was a prisoner. And when the war ended, I remember them sitting by the radio listening to names of people, prisoners who were being released now that the war was over. And they sat for many a night listening to names, and his name never showed up. They never did. Nothing was ever completely explained about what happened there, but he was declared dead at the end of the war. When I finished high school, in Norfolk, at that time, the city of Norfolk did not have a 4-year college. I think they said they were the largest city in Virginia that didn't have a 4-year college. We had 2-year college, and it was the Norfolk division of the College of William and Mary / VPI in those days, Virginia Tech now. And so there were 2-year branch of those two schools in Norfolk. There were no dorms. It was just it was really more like still going to high school, except we were taking college courses. And so when I finished there, to get a degree, I had to transfer somewhere. And I ended up transferring to the University of Richmond and got my degree in piano there. When I graduated, I decided to go to Union Theological Seminary, was in Richmond, which is the Presbyterian seminary. And they also had a school of Christian education. So I decided to go there for a couple of years and get a degree in church music. And it was going to be a combination of Christian education and church music. And when I got there, the first year, in fact, it was the first month we were there, I met my husband. And the seminary were mostly, in those days, were mostly men studying for the ministry. The school of education that I was in was mostly women who were going into Christian education. And we used to get together once a week, and that's where we met. It's funny because we called it a hymn sing. The men would come over to the women's side of the school, and we would have something to eat and dessert and sing some hymns, and the first night we went to it, he and I met, and it just seemed we just sort of hit it off right at the very beginning. And I think the next week had a date to go to a movie, and from then on he was just a very thoughtful person, and by Christmas we were engaged. And when I had my children, they said, if we had done that, you'd have been furious if we got engaged so soon. And, but we did, and we made it through. Well, after we had 5 children, and I wanted to get back into the music, doing some things, so I started teaching piano, and started with just a few students, and then it got more and more, and kept me busy, but it was what I was really enjoying doing. I especially enjoyed working with children. Had friends who taught adults, but I always enjoyed the children, so I spent most of my time working with children, and enjoyed doing things with them. That they ended up doing duets and various things with other people that were taking, and I enjoyed teaching groups like that. Yeah, and then I studied organ, so I played the organ, and I used to substitute in churches. For years I never took a job, because with 5 children it was hard to keep a job going constantly, but I would just substitute when people would need an organist. I'd get a phone call and say, can you play the organ next week? So I had a variety of churches I played in. So when that was interesting, learning the different things that different churches were doing, but it gave me something to do with my music, and I really enjoyed that. Do you know the first job I ever had? I should have said this. When I was in my last year of high school and my first year of college, I got a church that was just getting started, and they were meeting in a school building, and they needed a pianist, and they called me and got me to come play the piano. They paid me, they paid me $35 a month, and I went to choir practice one night a week. We had a Sunday morning service and a Sunday evening service, and they paid me, it was either $25 or $35 a month.
Norfolk or Greensboro?
Greensboro.
Mozart or Bach?
Mozart.
Pianist or pianist?
Pianist, I guess.
Beach or mountains?
Beach.
Apple or orange?
Oh gosh. Apple.
Upright or baby grand?
Baby grand.
Favorite hymn?
Oh gosh. Oh golly. I've got so many I can't even think of one right now. A mighty fortress is our God, I guess is.
Martin Luther. And last, in a short sentence, what is your secret to a long and happy life?
I guess getting along with people, loving what you're doing,